Good morning, everybody. Pick a card. Any card. Okay, not any card. We are going to talk today about the grist or thickness of our yarn. I'm going to continue to call it grist, so know that that's the thickness. And keeping with it and picking a grist and trying to figure out the thickness of your yarn. So there's all of these cards out there, and I don't have one because I don't believe in them, that, you know, give you a line and they want you to match your yarn up to that line, and that kind of tells you, oh, if you're on this line, then you're doing a 2-ply, you're going to have a fingering weight. That's not always true. So before we get to the cards, I wanted to show you these two little doodads. So these two little doodads, this one is, the white one is merino, and the redder one is Wensleydale. Oh, and my little things are coming undone here. But they're both wound up over an inch, and they both came out to 12 wraps per inch before they were washed. And then I washed them. The Wensleydale still comes out at 12 wraps per inch. And this one, the merino, comes out as, I think, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. So it lost 3 wraps per inch. Not lost it, but merino puffs up and it gets thicker. So if I'm using those control cards that are just standard basic control cards, and there's a way to use them, but I'm just trying to give you guys a little perspective here. And I was lining both of these up, only this one is going to stay true when I get to plying and washing it. The merino isn't. So it's kind of neat to watch the way some of these yarns puff up. So if you've got a little sample that you want to take that hasn't been washed, so take a bunch of it, kind of put it on your ironing board, and take a steam iron that has really good steam and kind of steam over it and steam it really, really good. And you can almost watch the fibers just plump up. And the Wensleydale won't do that. But just about everything else plumps up a little bit. And things like merino and Polworth and Targhee and Cormo all puff up a lot. So it's pretty hard to get the things exact when you're using those cards, and you're trying to figure out when you're using one of these plumper kind of fibers, which is most of them out there, and most of them that you're going to want to use for sweaters. So I always recommend that people make their own control cards. And I'm going to be putting this particular control card up on Patreon for people to download. And it just has all this information on it. And I know I've put out different versions of control cards before. There's one on Craftsy in my Foundations of Spinning class. I think I did one for Ply magazine, but I am big on these control cards, and I think that they're really important for a lot of things, particularly like the merino. And once they're done, they're done. I'm not saying you have to do this every time you spin. So I have a sample of merino here, and you can see the singles and the plied and then the plump. So it's the exact same sample as I used for this. And you can really see. So if I'm going into my sweater make and I look at this yarn and I figure out the wraps per inch and the size that it is, then I can figure out the sweater I want to make by looking at this, the completely finished sample of yarn. And then from that, I know that this is the single I need to spin, and this is how it needs to be plied. So that's the kind of key thing that you need to do to help yourself so that you know what you're getting. And once it's done, it's done. Like this, if I ever want to make this is a sample, say I wanted to do for this sweater, I keep this sample. I don't ever toss this away. This is something I keep. If I'm looking through my box and I know that I want to make a merino sweater and I've got like 5 of these sitting there, and I can go, That's not the yarn, that's not the yarn. Oh, that's the thickness I want. So this is the thickness I want, and then this is what I know I need to make for singles. I just pull this card out. I can keep it with my wheel, and then as I'm spinning, I can keep matching up my singles to this singles right here. Because if I was spinning thinking, you know, that this was the yarn I was going to get, and then it plumped up into this, it can be kind of disappointing when you're working on a sweater. And then you have this control card to match up your yarn every so often. So you can see I did the Wensleydale one, and just like the little tiny sample that we had on the wraps per inch, you can see that it's the same in the unfinished to the finished. But if I wanted to do this and I knew that this is the yarn that I wanted to make, I can still go back and match up my singles to this single. And it's way easier to match up this way, fiber to fiber. So every time you change to a new fiber, it matters and you need a new card. But once you have a card, I have these little boxes that I keep, like for all the squishy fibers and all the, you know, long wools and all of these things, super washes. So you can see, so there was that. This one was Targi, and this was an old club one that I had done. And you can see that it's all, it puffs up, puffs. Even the merino, this one was a little surprising to me. I didn't realize it was going to puff up that much. So you can see this is merino silk. It's an 80-20 blend. These were the singles. This was the plied. And this was the puffy after having been steamed and washed. So that's my hint for you today. If you're working on the sweater, you've got a sample. And if you've got a particular sweater and a particular weight in mind that you want to do, you may need to sample a bunch and wash a bunch before you find the singles that you need to do. And make your little cards. You don't have to use mine, but I will post them to Patreon soon. And just make sure that you're keeping all this information with you. Keep it at your wheel. And every time, like if you change a hook, double check yourself. If the tempo of the music or the video or whatever you're watching or listening to changes, like say, you know, the classical music picks up and you got a crescendo, or, you know, you're listening to rock music and it changes from a slow ballad to a heavy hitting one, you want to check, because most people, not everybody, but most people, their spinning will change. Their treadling will change, or their hands will change as they get involved in the music or the discussion that they're having or the movie that they're watching. I can tell you, I have a sweater that I was knitting and we were watching Star Wars. And I had done about that much of the sweater. And then we started watching a marathon of Star Wars. And then I did another 8 inches of that sweater while we were watching, because I was knitting faster, and it was completely out of gauge. And that's what happens. So just check yourself, make yourself a card, keep checking it, and you are going to be on track. So that's all I had to say today. And the next time we'll be going over more sweater hints and keeping on track and working on getting the project done. Bye, guys.